Shocking news after the weekend of Big Ten games. Paul Chryst is out, and Locked On Badgers is in to talk about it.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
If you're a sports fan, you probably already know the numbers never lie, and that rings true with Simply Safe as well. Over the last decade, more than 4 million people have switched over to Simply Safe to protect their homes. It's where you should go if you want to make sure that 24/7 your home is under lock and key. Not only will they, of course, keep an eye on everything that you have all the time, but they have the 24/7 tech support too, which is personally my favorite part, because you can have a great security system. You can have all the different kinds of monitoring and webcams and stuff that you can make sure your home is safe with. But what if something goes out? Security is one of those things that the criminals don't take a day off. If someone wants to try and rob your house, it can happen at any time. And you want to make sure that your security system is always up and running. So if anything ever goes wrong, you just give them a call and they get it right back up as soon as possible. And that's the key, because there's no point in having a good security system if it's a good security system that's broken. Right now, you can customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes over at simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege. But it's more than that. Save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Visit simplysafe.com/lockedoncollege to learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, let's talk some more Big Ten football here. Thanks again to Ryan Harings for going over the shocking news from over the weekend in the Big Ten. Paul Chryst out at Wisconsin, and we'll see what ends up happening here with the Badgers the rest of the way, but it's kind of a mess at the moment in Madison. We'll get again to more of that as we continue along with the season. But first, of course, let's look more at these games from over the weekend and wrap things up here as we take a final look at Week 4. Second biggest game of the weekend. Biggest becomes Wisconsin losing to Illinois if the result is Paul Chryst being gone. Second biggest Big Ten result of the weekend, Minnesota lost by 10 points at home to Purdue. This was a loss that I was surprised by. I was ready for Minnesota to run over a Purdue team that potentially could be without Aiden O'Connell. He did end up playing. But Minnesota fans will tell you, I was seeing it immediately after the game and have seen it since, that this was the Gophers losing this game more than it was Purdue winning it. The atmosphere around Minneapolis is still very much that Minnesota is pretty easily the best team in the Big Ten West, and I'm still there right with them too. I'm going to go through some stats here and talk about just what this loss means, but as far as just what Minnesota is, I still have them as the best team in that Big Ten West, and until anybody else really proves me otherwise, Purdue's obviously closest now, I'm still betting on the Gophers to take that spot to Indianapolis if I was choosing right now. Iowa seems more down than usual. Of course, you never know what's going to happen over there. Wisconsin obviously has a lot of stuff to figure out. But the teams that were going to be really good, or at least I thought had a chance to, we're talking Purdue, we're talking Nebraska, those teams just haven't showed up yet. And Purdue, maybe they start to turn it around. I guess I put them maybe at the second spot here in the West, but Minnesota is still, at least on paper and with the talent they have, is still the best team in that side of the conference. Moving on. Tanner Morgan wasn't great. 18 of 33. 3 interceptions on 18 of 33 passing. That's not a typical day for him. Gopher fans will point out that Mo Ibrahim was not playing in this game, and the running backs behind him did not step up in his absence. Bryce Williams ends up with basically nothing. Trey Potts, 0. It was a total of 47 yards on 26 carries as a team for the Gophers. That's a Minnesota loss every time. If you're playing a Big Ten football game and this PJ Fleck Minnesota team, which has throughout the time that it's been good, leaned on Mo Ibrahim in that running game, if they're putting up those numbers, congratulations. You're beating the Minnesota Gophers the week that you play them. That team cannot do it with that poor of a running performance. And Tanner Morgan just didn't have it to try and make it up and make things close. But still, in the fourth quarter, we go into things tied, and Minnesota just can't get the job done. Quite frankly, they didn't deserve to win that one. That was not a team on Saturday who came out and deserved to win a Big Ten football game. You can argue all you want about how they could have won it, and they could have won it. It was on the table for sure. Purdue gave them the opportunity. But Minnesota did not deserve to get that win. You can still say Minnesota's the better team. I still say Minnesota's the better team, but they didn't look any good. in what we saw on Saturday against Purdue. And I'm going to be looking at him as we go forward to kind of figure out, okay, was that a blip in the radar, or is it something we really need to be worried about? Because I was not expecting Purdue to be able to stop Minnesota's run game. Yes, Mo Ibrahim's not there, but Mo Ibrahim's been the one you lean on. He has not been all of that running attack. Part of the reason why we say Minnesota's run game is so good and the offense has been so solid is not because of Mo Ibrahim, but because it's Ibrahim and everyone there too, including Bryce Williams and Trey Potts, including the offensive line that has been good in the time that Mo Ibrahim has been there. All that combined, Minnesota's been a team that Mo Ibrahim's been out before. He was out all last season. He's missed games too. When these guys have had to step up, they've done really, really well. And it's not something where I think you just take Mo Ibrahim out of the game and the Gophers can't do anything on offense every time. It was just that they couldn't do anything on offense this time. So I'm not worried about Minnesota. I'm going to be watching for sure as we continue along the season. But I'm still leaning towards the side of I think that was maybe one of the low points instead of something that's legitimately something you need to be concerned about if you're a Minnesota fan. Other big result from the weekend. Michigan State, in my mind, is bad until further notice. Just bad in general. The offense isn't good enough to make up for how horrible the defense has been, and the pass defense in particular is just not stopping anybody. Against Maryland last week, Talia Tungavaloa, 32 for 41, 314 and a touchdown. They're 106th in the country in passing yards allowed per game at 275. That's not good. That's including 2 pretty weak non-conference games to start the season as well. So for Michigan State, it's not looking really good at all. Like, I'm okay with Minnesota right now. Michigan State really, really needs to turn things around. More stats. Let's get past passing. Just if you look at what an offense has wanted to do against Michigan State when they've played them, they've been able to do it. Outside of the 2 non-conference games at the beginning against non-Power 5 opponents. Against Washington, they throw for 397 yards. Against Minnesota, a team that runs, as we just mentioned, 240 rushing yards. And then last week against Maryland, as I mentioned, the 314 passing yards again. This team can't stop anybody. And it's not going to be any better this weekend against Ohio State. I cannot wait to see what that spread is, because if it's anything under like 20, I think I'm going to take it. On the Ohio State side, of course. It's not good. It's been really, really, really ugly. And I don't know if there's enough time to turn it around if you're Mel Tucker. This team has talent. I believe that still. But the defense has been so bad, especially over the top. And it wasn't, I mean, if you were watching that Maryland game, it wasn't just that Talia was doing his thing and throwing. There were wide open spots at some point. Spots where it's just like the guy's catching it, able to turn around and able to look and see where you can go before anyone's even near him. It seems almost dysfunctional right now and unorganized in what they're doing on the defensive side of the football. And there has not been enough of a sign that Peyton Thorne and the rest of the offense could make up for it in the games that really, really matter. So against Ohio State this weekend, it's going to be ugly. And we'll end up seeing what happens. But I would be surprised if Michigan State keeps it any sort of close. Only other notes I had, Michigan scored 27 points on Iowa. Iowa's defense is really, really good, but Michigan's offense needs to be really, really, really good for them to be a contender. So that's a situation where it's like, okay, I'm not concerned about the offense being good, but I'm just like, all right, I need this offense to be elite, and they weren't that. And then I'm also looking at the Penn State offense next week. 17 points against Northwestern. I wasn't able to watch a whole lot of that game live, but it was something where I see the final score and I look at the box score and I'm just like, how did they only score 17 against those Wildcats? So we'll see what ends up happening as we continue on the week with those teams. But those are the biggest results from the weekend, if you ask me, here on Locked On Big Ten. We're going to go into what's seemingly a low point for this conference here in a minute. Only 3 teams in the AP Top 25 this week for the Big Ten. Others back in receiving votes. But just how bad has this start to the season been? We'll talk about that in just a second, right here on Locked On Big Ten. Before we get to any of that, though, you know Built Bar. If you've been listening to a Locked On podcast, you've heard about Built Bar by now, and you may have already even heard about their newest flavor, the cookie dough chunk puffs. The Puffs are the newest evolution of the Built Bar. Before, you had the protein bars covered in chocolate. Now you keep the chocolate, throw in some marshmallow, you got a Puff. It's that much more tasty. It is as good as it sounds. And Built Bar has just been infusing its most popular flavors into puff form, including now the cookie dough chunk puffs. So if you've been a fan of the cookie dough chunk Built Bars, go on to built.com right now and check out the new puffs in that flavor or any other, and get some money off on us as well. Again, it's over at built.com with the promo code LOCKEDON15. It was just LOCKED15 for a while. They added the on in there now. It's LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, let's talk a little more on Big Ten as we wrap up here. It hasn't been pretty to start the season in the Big Ten. As I mentioned, Iowa's been bad. We thought they were going to be good. Minnesota has been really good. Northwestern has been bad. Nebraska has been bad. We thought they were going to be good. Purdue's been not so great. We thought they were going to be good. Right now in the Big Ten, we're seeing that struggle reflected in the top 25. This week, only 3 Big Ten top 25 teams. Number three, Ohio State, 4 Michigan, and Penn State creeps into the top 10 at number 10. Minnesota falls out by losing to Purdue, and you get both Minnesota and Purdue receiving votes in this poll, but neither crack that top 25. There hasn't been only 3 Big Ten teams in the top 25 all season. It hadn't happened the entirety of last season, and 2020 got confusing when I was starting to look things up, so I didn't go any further back. But the point is, it's been a really, really long time. We've only had this little representation among the best of the best in college football. And also, we put ourselves in a situation where last week, with the loss by Minnesota, we're back where we were last year in the Big Ten West, where in pretty much all likelihood, unless Minnesota runs the table to the Big Ten championship game, you're looking at a spot where on Big Ten championship Sunday, if there's an upset, the team that wins could very well not make the college football playoff. The team that loses could very well not make the college football playoff. And all of a sudden, the Big Ten is sitting there as last year's ACC and not having any sort of representation despite being one of the best conferences in all of the country. The Big Ten hasn't played up to it. And I want to touch on this now to maybe provide some optimism and say that this should be the low point. Because from now on, it's going to be just back to Big Ten teams beating up on other Big Ten teams. Teams will slide in and out of the top 25. I would imagine if a Minnesota, say, could win next week, maybe they can get back into the top 25 if things go their way elsewhere around the country. But this is not good. I was hoping we would not have a situation like the Michigan-Iowa Big Ten championship last year, where Iowa's not going to that title game if they win it, and Michigan's not going to the playoff if they lose it. The situation where the Big Ten does not get a college football playoff team is very much alive again this year. This has not been a good start to the season. And with how powerful and strong the Big Ten has been in every other aspect of what they do in this offseason and leading up to the season, it would seem like one of the bigger disappointments from a conference-wide standpoint in recent memory. I don't think it'll happen, of course. I think Ohio State's, if you ask me personally, I think Ohio State's going to run over everybody. And I think whoever does end up winning the East is going to win the Big Ten title game. But Big Ten is just voluntarily leaving that door open. That possibility of it happening where we end up just putting 2 SEC teams in, whoever wins the Big 12, and I don't know who would end up fourth. We'll see. But it's not there right now. And I'm hoping that we don't get to a point where we have to have that become a reality. Again, still a minuscule, I think, percentage at this point, but it's out there. And I don't love how, even if they are small, I don't love how good the odds are that it could happen, given how improbable and impossible, to be honest, it should be. We'll talk more on this, I'm sure, as the season progresses, as we will on anything else going on in the football season tomorrow and throughout the week here on Locked On Big Ten. Until then, be sure to follow us wherever you're getting your podcasts, on the podcasts app through Apple, on Spotify, of course. Follow us on YouTube or on Twitter. It's all Locked On Big Ten. And at the end, that's a 10, the numbers, not TEN spelled out. I'm at Nate with Sports on Twitter if you want to follow me and follow the weird stuff I'm tweeting out. Until tomorrow, Nate Dickinson with Locked On Big Ten.